Welcome in to Red Corner, Blue Corner, right here on Stadium. You see him, the Michigan Wolverine, Jake Butt, one of my great friends. He was a hell of a player back in his day.
Are you wearing a little, that's not necessarily scarlet,
no,
right? It's a little red?
Yeah.
Well, we're saying that because this is Joshua Perry, the Ohio State Buckeye, the captain, the national champion, and I can smell it in the air, Joshua. It's right around the corner.
Hey, listen, we're not going to talk about that right now.
Okay.
A little bit too early there, but we will talk about it later on in the show, and we'd like to welcome all of you in here. We want you to get involved in what we're doing here, so make sure you scan that QR code right there on the screen so you can get in the conversation. Follow us on Instagram, red_corner_blue corner, and watchstadium.com/submit if you have any videos you would like to share with us. Now, we are going to start off with the Michigan topic here. And history could be made. They're looking at their 1,000th win if they beat Maryland on Saturday. No other program in college football would be able to say that. It's big, but how big is it to win 1,000?
It's big and it isn't big. Like, I think 1,000 is great. It's a recognizable moment, the first team to do it. But of course, the big ones are the big games the following week against your rival. But to me, what's attractive about Michigan, what's attractive about the Big Ten is the history. As a guy from Columbus, Ohio, why I felt it was such a cool experience to go play for the Wolverines is the history. Being the first team to get to 1,000 wins, it's undeniable. Greatness, we recognize greatness in any individual moment. Sustained greatness is worth a further look. 1,000 wins is an example, JP, of sustained greatness.
Would 1,000 not feel as good if they were stuck on that number after the final Saturday of the college football season?
And that's why I said it right there, right? You're exactly right. I think they have their eyes on 1,001, assuming they handle business this weekend.
That's definitely what it feels like. But we got to rewind back to what happened last Saturday, and specifically in the run game. J.J. McCarthy's coming in. We had both talked about this off air, that it was a quarterback-centric offense, and they had really thrown the football well. The run game was good, but it wasn't as good as it was a year ago. And then against Penn State, we see 30 straight runs and kind of get back to the old school Michigan. They got big on them in that one. When you evaluate that, what was the biggest factor that you would say went into the idea that they were going to run it 30 times in a row?
I go back to when Ohio State played Penn State. And what I saw for both teams, Ohio State got back to doing what they do best, their offensive identity. Give Marvin Harrison Jr. the football. Michigan got back to their identity there in the second half. And they even almost doubled down. They were bringing in extra linemen, bringing in extra tight ends. They were almost in goal line formation in the middle of the field. 30 straight runs is about a mindset. It's saying, hey, we are going to line up. You know what we're going to do. We know what we're going to do. Everyone knows what we're going to do, and we'll dare you to try to stop it. I think a big reason it was successful, though, JP, that guy Donovan Edwards looked healthy.
He did.
Looked healthy. I think that's very encouraging to see. That's a little deposit for them that I think is important. They'll draw on it down the stretch of the season.
I mean, I think the same thing for Blake Corum, and we had talked about it too. Blake was a guy who was banged up last year. We knew that. He wasn't able to get his work in the offseason. We knew that. He wasn't talking about it, but we all certainly knew, and he looked like he had a little bit more of that bounce in his step. The 30-yard touchdown run, I think, was a phenomenal run out of him, but even on the 44-yard run, I believe, where he had that jump cut to the outside, the DB loss contained, no doubt, but Blake was quick enough to get out there, and I think it's something that we hadn't seen. I also look at this from a different perspective, though, and it's not about J.J. McCarthy, and it's not about the running backs. To me, that was a little bit about the offensive line and what they do well, because they said, listen, we could bring extra guys in here and we can move people off the ball and we can open up some gaps. And it might not be a ton of explosive plays, but we're going to get consistent runs, and then we're really going to hit you with a couple. But early on, I thought their tackles felt pressure. Real pressure for the first time this year, where they were like, our quarterback is going to get hit far too often, and we don't want to put him in that spot. So if we can just sustain this run game, playing with a lead, however big or small it might have been, they said Penn State can't chase us anyway, and we're going to take the pressure off of our tackles to have to go up against some premium pass rushers for Penn State.
That's a good adjustment, too, right? It's what's Socrates say? Know thyself, right? They knew themselves. Chop Robinson, Penn State, that's what they do about as good as anyone, is get pressure on the quarterback. So getting back to their bread and butter was important. And here's something I want to ask you.
Go ahead.
Because you've been high on Sherrone Moore for a while now. Couple instances where we've got the chance to see Sherrone Moore as a impromptu head coach.
Sure.
What is the importance and significance of how he's carried himself and led the team this year? And do you think maybe his name's going to come up in coaching searches?
His name should have already been in the mix. I think it's going to be further in the mix here. And obviously, whatever happens with the NCAA and what they find out there, I think would have something to say about what his market is. But let's say he's the guy that we believe that he is, an upstanding citizen that had no idea what was going on with Connor Stallions. Get all of that out of the way. This is a guy who, to me, showed that he can galvanize a group of young people to follow him. And I think that's the most important thing that a coach has to do. It's not about the X's and O's. It's about what you can get your players to believe in. Now, let's look at the X's and O's. I agree with you that it was the right decision for Michigan to go ahead and say we're going to run the football the way that they did against Penn State because it was all they needed to do to win. I think it does ask a question, though, of if the run game wasn't working, what was going to be your next move? Because your tackles were struggling in pass pro, and then if you couldn't get the run game started, what was that adjustment? We didn't need to find it out. I do think it's a question that people are going to ask. And then the final thing, of course, is do you have all the other makings to be a big-time head coach? And people will point to that post-game interview, and they'll be like, oh, Sherrone, too emotional. He was swearing, all that other stuff. Listen, I wouldn't look too far into that. That's a guy who cares about his players. That's a guy who was thrown into some adversity, whether the program caused it or not. And that was his response to it. If you have questions about what he's going to be like in front of the media, do all of the mock press conferences you need to with that guy, because you'll figure out he can ace that kind of stuff. He is made to be a head coach. And quite frankly, you could ask some questions about who he will be as a leader of a program, but I think he answered a ton of them in that game too.
And frankly, if you're making a head coach hire based on how you think they'll answer questions to the media, that might not be first on my list of what I'm going to evaluate a head coach. And you said something about the run game that I thought was important, because you can ask the question, what would have happened if Penn State stopped the run? Could you have passed the ball? But you said we didn't need to find out. And that's the fairness here is until the other, you make your adjustment, it's on the coach, Penn State, to make their adjustment, then you have to counter. We didn't need to find out. They've proved it this year that they can pass it when they needed to.
The ADs who are asking the question about what his adjustment would have looked like, you need to ask Manny Diaz that question.
And there you go right there, exactly. It was on him, Manny. It was on Manny. All right, well, why are we talking about head coaching vacancies? Because there's a huge one there at Texas A&M, and one name who has been hot on the trail for this head coaching vacancy is Oregon's Dan Lanning. But he was asked this in his presser. He shot the rumors down. Take a look.
Everything I want exists right here. I'm not going anywhere. There's zero chance that I would be coaching somewhere else. I've got unfinished business here. There's a lot that I want to accomplish here at Oregon. My number one priority is being elite here at Oregon. And we have the resources, the tools. Anybody that can't understand why you would want to be here at this place doesn't understand exactly what exists here.
What do you think?
Well, I think he's right. I look at Oregon right now. We've talked about Oregon for a long time as the Nike money school, and they have all of the cool gear. They've got great facilities. They can entice young people to want to come on campus. And you put a dynamic personality like Dan Lanning there, and you already see what's happening with that program. They could be in the college football playoff by the end of this year. Now you bring them over to the Big Ten. What's going to happen with that? Of course, increased revenue, right? That's a big deal for a guy like Dan Lanning to want to stay in a place like Oregon. And then I start to look at the landscape a little bit in the Big Ten Conference. Of course, you're going to have Michigan, who's going to, it feels like, continue to be a perennial power. Ohio State, whether they beat Michigan or not this year, they're still going to be nationally relevant. And then whoever the next team is, a Penn State or somebody else, you really got three teams to beat. You look at Oregon, they're going to be another one. Depends on what happens with Washington and USC and their quarterback turnover as well. I look at them as being in a great spot coming into the Big Ten. Rather going to Texas A&M, where you have Texas and Oklahoma that are playing in your sandbox in terms of recruiting. Now they're also coming to your conference. From a geography standpoint, Louisiana State is not very far from them. So now you're competing against those guys. Guess who we haven't talked about yet? We haven't talked about Alabama yet. We haven't talked about Georgia yet. That is a difficult place. Highly capitalized, great facilities, a fan base who cares. I totally understand all of that. But you'd rather be at Oregon, right?
Yeah, because there's a minimum. Hey, I'm going to go where I can get paid, and you're getting paid really damn good out there at Oregon. And then where can you succeed? Where can you exceed expectations? It seems to me that Oregon's in a better position than what would be Texas A&M. And I say, hey, maybe I'll get burned for saying this. I do trust him. he did sound serious. But I have been burned by head coaches many times before when they said 0 chance I'm not leaving. And then they leave. I've been burned one too many times. So I think he's playing the game the correct way for his team right now as they're going to a playoff race. I'm sure his agent called him and said, you just gave up all our leverage, brother. What do we got going on here?
Listen, I think it'll be totally fine. And I'll say this last thing about Oregon before we get to a question about the A&M opening. Is Oregon, I believe, has played in 2 national title games since 2010. What has A&M done to that scale?
Not that.
Exactly, and that's the point
exact
about
opposite
being
of that.
at Oregon. Now, a name that has popped up for Texas A&M is a name that people here in Big Ten country know, and that is Urban Meyer. Do we think he's a fit there?
You know, when we talked about the Michigan State job, I said there's no way, right? I said, but I think maybe to me it'd be more attractive for him to go to Texas A&M. Urban's a coach that's a fit anywhere. There's no specific place where he'll succeed. He's succeeded everywhere he's been. So that's maybe a more attractive name. But I think he's really enjoying what he's getting. It would have to be the perfect job. He's got a legacy to consider.
$12 million a year, I'm sure, would be enticing to Urban Meyer.
He'd pick up the phone.
We know that this guy can recruit. We know that he can put together a great staff. We know he can motivate, and he's won championships in multiple places.
They've recruited well.
They have.
They've recruited well.
But Urban ain't doing that, man. I don't think he wants these problems nowadays. It's a different game, and quite frankly, he looks good on the television. All right, we're going to take our first break right here on Red Corner, Blue Corner. On the other side, we're going to get to the Big Ten West. Matt Rule, Luke Fickell maybe have a little bit more in common than just their records this week. Who has done the better job in their first year at the helm? We'll discuss that coming up. 11 damn days. That's it.
Wow.
Oh, how's it feel?
Wow.
How's it feel?
Oh, I could smell it in the air. I could see it on the horizon. Hoping both teams do their part this weekend to continue fanning the fire a little bit.
Brother, if either one of these teams loses this weekend, we got a real big problem. We got bigger problems than the game, right? Because, I mean, the matchups are favorable.
I can't wait to see the viewership numbers on that.
Yeah.
I think what Penn State, Michigan did about 10 million, like 9 mil plus or something like that.
9.1 million. I think we could get close to 20 million.
I think so too.
All right, so I'm glad you brought up the matchups coming up this week because a lot of people think that they can be overlooked. I think both of these teams are in a place that they would not overlook the opponent that's coming up for this weekend. But take me back to the locker room days. You and I sat in there the week before the game. Where does your mind go as you're kind of preparing into this final stretch 11 days away?
You are always aware of the game, but that's a year-round thing. Like you are. I mean, shoot, you have Michigan has Ohio State drill. Ohio State has Michigan drill. You're like conditioned into this, so you're always aware of it. You still have to be focused, but you know, as it gets closer, it gets a little bit more real, and social media is a big piece of this. So with everything going on with Michigan, like, you know, both guys on both teams try to stay focused on the task at hand, which is practice today and playing your game. But with where we're at with these stories in the media, every college football team's aware of it, but those two teams are going to be a lot more aware of it. In terms of on the field, though, we had a conversation about a year ago about this. So are they practicing at all for each other this week? This is where coaching comes in. The players should not know. The players should just say, oh, this is the play that I'm going to run. But the coach may sprinkle in a couple looks that he think will be a big part of the game the following week. So you're kind of subconsciously conditioning your players without them having any idea.
Yeah, and I know Michigan, they went to the beat Ohio period, right? And we used to have a team up north period throughout practice. So there were those times where we knew exactly what we were going up against. But yes, you're right. There are other times where the coach is like, all right, we'll throw a little something in here. It mirrors what we're going to see in the game Saturday for sure. But we know Michigan is going to run this concept. We know Ohio State's going to run this concept. I absolutely love it. I also think that as the game gets closer, I knew I did this in practice. You say you practice 100% every day, but then you always find another gear for this game. And it's like, all right, scout team, I'm sorry, guys, and I love you to death, but I'm going to be hitting you a little bit more this week. I'm going to be hitting you a little bit more because I'm trying to get prepared for the bumps and the bruises and the hits and the battles that come within that game.
It's almost like a psychedelic, like primitive experience. I don't know. Like I remember the same thing of what you're 100%, but then you do find an extra gear. Where does that come from? I don't know. But like all my senses were elevated throughout that week. I felt lighter in spirit. The smell of the turf was better. Even the bruises, I was able to shake it off from practice. Everything just, it gets turned up big time next week. But we're in the process of preheating the oven right now, if I could give you a good analogy.
I like that analogy. Now, you mentioned, pressure for either team coming in. I know that Michigan right now, you talk about all the things that are swirling around. I think that there's a sense of pressure that may come from the idea that people are trying to discredit what you have done the last 2 years, in particular against Ohio State. And I know for Ohio State, you were on the losing end, regardless of what went on in the game. There were still plays where I could put on the tape and be like, this ain't got to do with any sign stealing. Y'all just got your butts whooped right here. Do you think the pressure is higher on the Ohio State or the Michigan side, considering everything that's gone on?
Man, what if they're just at max pressure for both of them? Like, who really wins? I mean, look, so Michigan, you laid it out perfectly, flat out. Like, you laid it out perfectly. Michigan, people are going to try to discredit your previous wins, but also not just that. You think you're the number one team in the country. You've been saying it all year long. A lot of people picked you to win the national champion. You're at home. You have the better quarterback. You have the more experienced team in this matchup. So all of this is building up to say, Michigan, you have no excuse if you don't get it done. On the flip side, for Ryan Day, you've been a damn good coach. Won a lot of games, just about as much as anybody. But you haven't beat Michigan. These last 2 years have been the tough piece. So Ryan Day, well, now there's no Connor Stallions. The whole narrative outside of this is just building it.
It's an odd spot for Ryan Day to be in, right? He's a coach that has coached in a national championship game. He's been to the college football playoff 3 times. And still, there is this talk about, well, what happens if he doesn't beat Michigan? I think there's an added layer of pressure to that. And for those players, they have to compartmentalize. And for the coach,
Good point.
I think emotion is good, but you can't be overly emotional because you get your team out of sorts. Now, before we move on to our next topic, I do want to check in on our poll right now. Who's your Heisman winner?
Wow.
46% of you are saying Bo Nix. I just want to point out two guys. Jaden Daniels with 8% of the vote and Marvin Harrison Jr. with 9% of the vote. You guys don't know what the hell you're watching. I just want to put that out into the universe. This is wild.
Please, if you go to the comments, explain, please. If you could just go into the comments and let us know why Jaden Daniels isn't number one. All right, make the case for Bo Nix, and maybe we'll bring some up. But it is crazy. All right, you mentioned the next topic. This is a big one because you played for Luke Fickell.
That's right.
Also going to talk about Matt Rule, two of the new coaches in the Big Ten West. Both came in with different narratives, different expectations, and as you see the stats there, both sitting at 5-5, a different method. But JP, really, as you look at this, who has done the better job this year?
The better job has been Matt Rule. I'm going to be completely clear about this. It has been Matt Rule because I think he took over a program that was in worse shape than the one that Luke Fickell took over. This was a Nebraska team that consistently lost games that they were supposed to win. That is a mental problem. This is a team that could not get out of their own way. And now they are finding ways. They've lost some games, certainly in some questionable ways, but they are finding ways to win these games now. And it's not pretty. They turn the football over too much. They cannot throw the football down the field with any type of consistency. But I like the way they fly around on both sides of the ball, and that defense is nice. For Luke Fickell, he had a better opportunity to come in and have success. People picked him to win the Big Ten West. And I look at what they're going through right now, and I think he's got a question about what he's got in the locker room. And it's not to say that those players aren't good, but are they ready to stand up to the test of a Luke Fickell-run program? Because that is going to be a grind, and that's what he's trying to figure out.
Completely different psychological experiment here where Matt Rule has had to teach his guys how to win once again. They've been able to overcome that, though they still have a long way to go. They almost shaked off the narrative that this team's cursed. Whereas Luke Fickell, I think these guys are now fighting it. Guys in the locker room are saying, if you don't want to be a part of this, get out. I sense a little bit of divide in that locker room. So different paths each team has taken this year.
It's going to be a unique thing to watch because I think both of these programs are definitely on the upswing, but we don't know how long it's going to take for them to get there. All right, we're going to take one final break right here on Red Corner, Blue Corner. Coming up, we talked about it just a little bit. Marvin Harrison Jr., can he take home the Heisman? I have some thoughts on that. And we're going to be joined by our friends from Rivals Down South to debate Georgia. Do they deserve the top spot in the CFP rankings? That's next. Time for a little conference clash right here on Red Corner, Blue Corner. T-Bob Hebert, Hudson Mason joining us over here. And fellas, let's talk about it right now. There's a couple guys out there in the Heisman conversation from either one of our conferences, and some of us might have even gone to the same school as some of these guys. And I feel like they're not getting the proper respect. They're not getting the respect they deserve. I'm going to start off right here. Marvin Harrison Jr., I love this guy to death. You watch him play the game of football. And we saw it against Michigan State, and I know Michigan State's not good. My man had a rushing touchdown. He had 2 receiving touchdowns. He barely even broke a sweat doing it. That's how good he is. Against Penn State, he was marvelous, ridiculous. He got whatever he wanted out there, and he has done that with consistency this college football season. Just the fact that there's not enough respect being thrown his way is wild to me.
Let me expand off that, JP, because, context matters too. And Devontae Smith, you can compare the stats and say, okay, Devontae had a crazy, crazy season. Remember the beginning of the year? Brand new quarterback, Kyle McCord, brand new offensive line. It's taken them a while to build that chemistry, but the film at that point is undeniable. And now once you see a few games in that they've built this chemistry, you see the explosive athlete, one of the best wide receiver prospects maybe of all time at this point. Isn't that the definition of Heisman?
I mean, T-Bob, I know there's a guy you want to stump for, and I'm in full support of your guy too, so I'm going to let you have the floor.
So here's the deal. Yes, Marvin Harrison Jr. is awesome, and he is the best player on a potential championship team. I do not feel he is the best player in America. I think he should win the Blitnikoff. And look, if they beat Michigan, I think, and win the Big Ten, I think he should go to New York City for the ceremony, right? So I'm a big believer in Marvin Harrison as well. But just like when we talk about playoff teams, everybody's great that we're talking about. So then we have to critique. And it's not to say they're bad, like obviously, right? So we're going to look at these angles. And to win a Heisman at wide receiver, I do feel that you have to be a statistical outlier. And right now, while Marvin Harrison Jr.'s numbers are elite, he is not a statistical outlier. In the same way, we have said to win a Heisman at quarterback when your team has multiple losses. What do you have to be? You have to be a statistical outlier. And right now, Jayden Daniels, that's what he is. He is a walking, talking, playing outlier. He's leading the nation in total offense by 57 yards, averaging more than 80 different. He's accounted for 38 touchdowns this year. That's more than 81 teams have scored. He's leading. And you look at these other guys right here: Tim Tebow, Robert Griffin III, Lamar Jackson. What did they all have in common? They were all statistical outliers, like Jayden, who again leading the country now in total yards per play, QBR, passing touchdowns, rushing yards by a quarterback. And I'll give you credit, Jake, because I did come in here with some numbers comparing him and Devontae Smith, right? Because Smith was that outlier. But that's a fair point that you made. So I won't even go there. Marvin Harrison Jr. is awesome. But right now, he's 7th in the country in yards per game with neighbors, Odunze, Troy Franklin all being better. He averages 6 catches a game for 29th. I don't care much about that. 2nd in touchdowns. Amazing. Not good enough. At least how we hand out the Heisman nowadays, right? Where it's mainly that quarterback-centric award, not good enough to take it home. In my opinion, it should go to Jayden Daniels, the best football player in America. Now it's time for Rivals Down South, but I need to allow y'all a chance to rebut here. Joshua, why should Marvin Harrison Jr. win it over Jayden Daniels?
Well, I think the reality of the situation is Jayden Daniels is number 1 on my ballot. If I had a ballot, I love him to death. But the idea of Marv having to be a statistical outlier, too, I think is a little bit of fallacy because the offense that Ohio State runs this year is not created for him to necessarily do that. He doesn't have the quarterback who hits him with consistency like C.J. Stroud would have. There have been plenty of times Marv has been scot-free, wide open. The quarterback either didn't see him or he missed. And that's not Marv's fault. But when you watch the tape and you actually watch the individual ISO plays of him, he's out there cooking people all day long. Like, that's just what he does.
It's kind of funny. So, yeah, like Kyle McCord is holding him back, and the LSU defense is screwed over Jayden Daniels.
Yes.
So both guys are having to overcome some deficiencies. Hey, it's the ultimate team game. I'm fascinated to see where it goes. And look, one thing that doesn't work in Jayden's favor that all the other candidates are going to have, like Bo Nix, like Marvin, like Penix, is they're going to be playing on championship weekend, and that will matter.
People
now,
turn in their ballots before that anyway. We already know this, so it's not. I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal.
do people really do that? I actually don't know that. I don't know
They-
much about the Heisman voting process. That seems crazy to me.
So yeah,
That seems crazy.
yeah, a lot of people do.
I think though, because being in that conversation helps you because you're talking about which teams are going to play, and then at the college level, really at any level, you have a few guys that are the difference makers on those teams. So it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, effectively, when you're talking about championship team and then Heisman contender.
Now, let's move the conversation a little bit. Playoff rankings coming out tonight. And Hudson, I get a lot of Georgia fans on my timeline as of late. And they seem to be especially excited for tonight's rankings. Hudson, do you expect the Georgia Bulldogs to finally claim that number one spot in the CFP when we watch that television show that we've all trumped up later?
Yeah, I do. I would certainly be surprised given the fact that the last 2 weeks and still where the Missouri's win over Tennessee and then in dominant fashion. Look, whether it be the eye test or the resume, I think Georgia has both of those going for them right now. The last 2 weeks and, what they did in dominant fashion against Missouri and Ole Miss. So the hardest thing is you never really know what this committee is going to favor. They seem to switch it up depending on who the team is. Is it going to be eye test? There's not a whole lot of consistency, but I would be a little surprised. I would be quite surprised just because I think the past 2 weeks, not only have they beaten two top 15, really top 10 teams now, but they've done it in dominant fashion.
So I would say this. I thought Reese Davis made a really good point last week where he said, no, I actually do believe there is consistency. It's just that we're trying to decide these things at the margins, like we just talked about. Everybody's great. We're trying to decide who's just maybe a little more great. So in some instances, maybe the disparity in eye test is enough to overcome whatever the resume gap is, whereas in others, it's the inverse. So to me, when you look at Georgia, like, okay, maybe they score highest on the eye test, but not highest on the resume, but the combination of the two helps them edge out all the other combination of those elements. Boys, Jake, let's start with you. What do you think, man? Do you think, well, first off, should Georgia be number one? And then after Michigan's big win, do they move at all?
Well, here's the interesting thing, because I think Ohio State maybe played one of their best games of the season. I understand the opponent, but McCord probably looked as good as he had all season. The defense has been stout in stepping up. But you're right. I think that at this point, the resume is undeniable. If you were going to put them toe-to-toe, Georgia now has the resume and the eye test. They check every box. I think the interesting piece is, though, if you decide to put Georgia at number one, to me, the conversation then becomes, why wouldn't you put Washington at 4 over Florida State because of their resume? I mean, look, in time, we learned the Arizona win's a pretty damn good win, right? The Oregon win. Utah's a damn good team. USC, I get it. It's still a quality win at this point. So I think in spirit of consistency, if you move Georgia up, you might have to consider moving Washington up too.
I'm there with you. I think it should be Georgia. I like Michigan in the 2 spot. Ohio State can be at 3, but Washington gets into my top 4. Florida State has not shown that they are a team that I can trust to go out there and handle business the way that they need to. And I know winning's the most important thing, but when we talk about college football, it's also how you win, because there's so much disparity in the talent, in the rosters, in the coaching, etc. And I've also made the comment that I do think that Oregon is a better team than Washington. I'm also just going to leave that out of this for now, because it will sort itself out by the end of the year. But the sake of conversation here, Florida State is not a top 4 team in my mind anymore, so we need to get them out of there.
So, yeah, like in pursuit of consistency within it being a combination of everything, the combination of Washington elements, I mean, I think we're all in agreement. Like, it edges out Florida State. Now, that said, Florida State's fine.
Yep.
Because, like, Michigan and Ohio State are obviously going to take care of one another. One will survive, the other will fall, and Florida State will slot right back in as long as they continue to win and control their own destiny. The only thing I would say is I would keep Ohio State at 2. I think what the two teams did against Michigan against Penn State are relatively similar, and Ohio State still has a Notre Dame win. And, like, while that's an awesome win for Michigan, I did emerge on the other side of it thinking these two teams feel relatively equal, or maybe it wasn't maybe the emphatic statement that I wanted to see out of Michigan, Jake. Like, I wanted to see more Roman Wilson. I wanted to see more threat on the outside. I know game flow dictated they didn't have to, because I mean, James Franklin will just throw rocks at you all day long, but it just didn't launch them above Ohio State, in my opinion.
Yeah, resume. You can look. Ohio State could stay at 2. Shoot, maybe you could even keep them at 1. But if I'm comparing these two games, I do think there's interesting ways to look at it. You know, it's sexier to throw the ball to Marvin Harrison Jr. than to do what Michigan did. But which is run the football. All I saw is each team in a challenging environment got back to their foundational identity. Marvin Harrison Jr., get him the ball for Ohio State, run the ball for Michigan. But when you consider the context of Michigan going on the road to Penn State, Penn State's offense had a chance to improve after playing Ohio State. And you consider the fact that Michigan found out their head coach wasn't going to be there less than 24 hours before kickoff. That maybe adds a little bit more value to Michigan's victory, in my opinion.
And I look at Michigan, too, and I think that a lot of us already thought that they were the better football team than Ohio State. And so now they have that win. I think that they should move ahead of them. But, T-Bob, you made a great point here. The more that I have watched Michigan this year and the more that I have watched Ohio State this year, I don't think the gap is as big in my mind anymore as it once was toward the beginning of the season. Also, a Roman Wilson stat for you. 4 of his 10 receiving touchdowns have come against Power 5, 6 of his 10 against Group of 5 opponents.
Bit of a paper Roman. Classic saying. I don't think anybody's ever said that. All right, boys. Jake, Joshua, thank you so much. Y'all have a great day. It's time to dive into some SEC, Hudson, and yo dogs, Hudson Mason, on an all-time heater right there. Look at that, man. 27 wins in a row. That is the second longest in SEC history behind Alabama, who did it, 2 separate times. And in all likelihood, the dog dynasty should roll right along. And so it does. There's a couple different ways that you could approach this. And it's something that I've been thinking about more and more lately. What's more impressive to you, Hudson? The fact that they've done this winning streak in the age of transfer portal, NIL, when everything's very fluid and your foundations are shifting, or that they've created this dynasty at the same time that Nick Saban and the Alabama dynasty exists?
Yeah, I think it's the fact that they've done it at the same time that Nick Saban, the greatest college football coach of all time, is still coaching. I mean, look at just the history of dynasties. How hard is it? I don't care what sport you're looking at. Go study dynasties. How hard is it to knock down the reigning dynasty, the reigning champion, and then let alone stay atop? It's one thing to get there, but then to stay atop that mountain like Kirby Smart has the past 2 years is really impressive. And to me, that's why it's more impressive, because Alabama is still a really good team. I don't think they are as dominant as they used to be, but they're still a really, really good team. And so the era of NIL and transfer portal and stuff isn't as impressive to me with what Georgia's doing, because they were already the rich, right? It's like Nick Saban said, this whole name, image, and likeness only makes the rich richer. So it's not like it's a mid-major team or a non-Power 5 team doing this. This is Georgia, who has a great alumni base. They have a lot of resources, a lot of money. I think it's more that Kirby Smart has been able to build his own version of Alabama in the East.
I mean, it's without a doubt. And not only did he do it at the same time that the best college football dynasty that we've ever seen existed, and was still very much in power. When Kirby starts this rise, Alabama was not declining. Like, one of the only reasons why we think they are declining is because of the rise of Smart. So almost view it like a graph where you have this giant crimson blob, right? And all of a sudden this little red and black circle breaks up and it grows and grows and grows. And right now it is in the process of fully absorbing that blob. That's why this Atlanta game means so much. If Kirby Smart beats Nick Saban, it'll only be the second time, but importantly, it will be the second time. And then wins a national championship, third national championship in a row, something Nick Saban has never done. Already, I feel comfortable in saying that Georgia is the best program in the entire country, but they can put, an exclamation mark. They can close the book on that discussion, what goes on in Atlanta. So to build all of this with the Alabama elephant in the room sucking up all the oxygen, and to do it right in full view of Saban is nothing. It's mind-boggling. Like, I can't find a parallel in sports for any of it. And yeah, NIL, it's only going to get more dangerous. I love the Hardcore History podcast with Dan Carlin, right? And he has an excellent, very long series on World War II, specifically the Pacific Theater. It's called Supernova in the East. And in that, he says, the Japanese are like all of us, only more so. Well, that's Georgia, right? Like I look at LSU, and they have an entire state's economy, right? The only Power 5 show in town. Only the state economy kind of is what it is. They got a lot of great natural talent, right? But not a lot of people. You look at Georgia, they've got a ton of people. They've still got the highest per capita talent rate when you talk about producing Division I athletes. They're the only Power 5 show in town, and they have a thriving state economy. So, yes, the Bulldog Empire seems to be set up to thrive for a very long time. It's a little intimidating outside looking in. And you heard it from Mark Stoops and Lane Kiffin, right? They're both coming out after the game. They're like, look, man, I don't know. We signed one 5-star. They have 27. Now, again, the key difference is Mark Stoops doesn't beat the bad teams. Lane Kiffin does. So that's why I'll accept it from Kiffin, not from Stoops. But how big is the gap, do you think, right now between Georgia and the rest of these teams?
Oh, it's seismic. I mean, I don't necessarily know how to put it into perspective, but I mean, Lane Kiffin said it the other day. You got one team in Georgia that's got 14 5-stars on the roster. Ole Miss has one. I don't even know if Kentucky has one 5-star. If they have a 5-star on campus, it's on the basketball team. It's not on the football team. So, that's the reality of the world that the teams in the SEC East are looking up to. Kirby Smart is a recruiting machine. He loves to recruit. He lives for it. He loves football. That's why he fits college football, not the pros. That's why you don't have to worry about him leaving to go to the NFL. He is built for college football, 18 to 20-year-old kids. He lives and breathes recruiting, and that's the lifeblood of any successful football program.
So blue chip ratio is the ratio of 4 and 5 stars you have in your roster. Georgia third in the country at 77%. Alabama first at 88. And then everybody else is lagging, right? So the point of all that is Kirby Smart doing a hell of a job. What's shocking is A&M is fourth at 73%. And that's why Jimbo Fisher just got fired. And so it does beg the question, what's next for Texas A&M Aggies? And, well, will Sam Pittman be taking his own Polar Express out of Fayetteville? We'll discuss it next here on Rivals Down South. Oh, look at that, dude. Polar Express is on. Heck yeah, dude, I love that movie. Actually, to be honest, I think Polar Express is one of the lesser Christmas movies, but the younger generation tends to like it more, and I guess the Arkansas freshmen do, because yes, that was footage of Arkansas players watching Polar Express on the television at halftime. When it rains, it pours. Sometime, Hudson, and although I really like Sam Pittman, he can't catch a break because, of course, that was at halftime in a game that they go on to lose terribly. That was I was getting my wires crossed. I was thinking Mississippi State A&M, but that's at halftime of a game against Abilene Christian. Here's the deal. They were very clear that those are freshmen who essentially don't travel with the team, right? So they're not actually involved in any of the game day meetings. That's a separate side locker room. It's not that big of a deal. It's certainly nothing that I'm ever familiar with. Anybody on the team do anything like that during the game? It's not that big of a deal, but here's where it matters now, Hudson. It's perception, right? The perception is what matters here. And once again, that was at the loss to Auburn. You're right. They were getting their butts kicked. So I think for Pittman, this is just more dirt on the coffin in a way. It doesn't even matter the truth of it.
Yeah. First off, shame on the kid who posted that on social media. Come on, bro.
Yeah.
Have some more awareness. Clearly, that was a kid that was in that locker room. But, yeah, I don't think it's that big of a deal. It's bad for optics, I think, from outside fans. If you think that that's in the locker room, or it's in the normal locker room where the rest of the players who actually playing are. But if you read the story and educate yourself on it, this was walk-ons. This was non-scholarship guys who Coach Pittman wanted to dress out, wanted them to give an opportunity. There wasn't enough room in the regular locker room, so this was a side locker room that they put them in. And I guess they love animated Christmas movies because for whatever reason it was on. So not a great look, but I don't think it's the end of the world. If that was your starting quarterback at halftime, just chilling, watching Polar Express, then it'd be a different story.
It still is kind of crazy. I mean, my strength coach would have murdered somebody if an 18-year-old had been watching that during the game. All right, let's talk Texas A&M. So A&M moves on from Jimbo Fisher, Hudson, and you're actually calling the Aggies game this weekend. What does that look like as you normally have like coaches meetings and whatnot? What is this process like for you?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I mean, communication has been a little slower, but understood with everything that they got going on. I think the broadcasting crew for like SEC Network Plus is like maybe at the bottom of the totem pole on their priority list right now. But it's going to be interesting. We don't meet with them until Friday in person. But new quarterback, new coach, a lot of speculation around the program of who the next coach is going to be. Jalen Henderson steps in last week against Mississippi State. He's their third quarterback that they've played this year. It is in complete disarray, and there's no really ever easy way to fire a coach. But this one feels like, T-Bob, that it was as unexpected as the timing of it was unexpected. Coming off of a big win, 50 points. Typically, when you fire a coach, it's more toward the end of the regular season. I think this caught Jimbo by a lot of surprise, and I think it caught the players by surprise, the timing of when it happened.
So that is true. However, when you read the tea leaves here, there was a Board of Regents meeting on Thursday before the Mississippi State game. So before the big win where you put up 50, and that meeting took place immediately after you lost to Lane Kiffin for a third year in a row. As Lane Kiffin is out there in the media saying, we're in the top 10. We're playing a team that should be. Yeah, exactly. Right. So it was too much. It was death by 1,000 cuts for Jimbo. And we can get into the numbers. I mean, it was deserved. They were really bad. 19. Okay. Since he got his extension, 19-15 overall, 10-13 against the SC, 12-14 against Power 5, 1-9 in true road games with a 9-game losing streak. Just awful. So where does Texas A&M go next? And people want one of the Dans. They want Dan Lanning. That ain't happening. Dan Campbell, that ain't happening. Like Dan Lanning was very clear today. He is happy in Oregon. He's not motivated by money. He has everything he needs. Why in the hell would he go to A&M? And unfortunately for the Aggies, they are figuring out, like many young rich kids do in real life, that money is just not going to buy you immediately your way to success. There's hard work. So they're going to have to take a chance on a coach, Hudson. There is no slam dunk hire to be had out there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, there's not a coach out there with a championship ring that's coming. Like when Jimbo Fisher was at Florida State. I know some people have said Mike Norvell. Mike Norvell has built Florida State up. I don't think he's leaving for the Texas A&M job. It may be a name like Mike Elko, a guy that's kind of built a place up like Duke, has proven he can win at a tough place with tough academic restrictions. But I agree with you. I don't think there's any headliner A-list name that's coming for this job.
Still to come, we're going to play a win Jimbo Fisher's money, since he's got a lot of it coming his way on Rivals Down South. Welcome back to Rivals Down South. It's time to play Win Jimbo Fisher's Money. And there's a lot of it. About $30 million Hudson due within 120 days, and then $7 million a year for 8. I mean, let's go, dude, for 8 years. If we get 3 of the 5 right, we win.
Shout out to Jimmy Sexton.
The legend. Do the 30 for 30 on Jimmy Sexton creating a buyout market. It's unreal. All right, Hudson. Name the Texas A&M Aggies' last road victory. They've lost 9 in a row. I know. You
conference, want the answer. Or is it a conference win, or is it just
It is a conference game, and it's against an Eastern team. They're very good this year.
They have LSU. LSU.
No. 2021 at Mizzou, the last time, 2021, 2 years ago, the last time they won. All right, Hudson, let's, next question. Here we go. Win Jimbo Fisher's money. What did Jimbo Fisher receive as his introductory press conference?
A plaque with a blank date on it.
There we go. A blank flag for a national championship. How many ranked finishes did Jimbo Fisher get in his multiple seasons at Texas A&M?
2.
0. How many 10-win seasons did he have?
2.
0. How many wins versus ranked opponents on the road?
0.
Yeah, there we go. We hit the theme. Heck yeah. Unfortunately, Hudson, that is only 2 of 5. You will not be winning Jimbo Fisher's money. Thank you, Dan, for putting that together. Thank you all. We'll see you tomorrow on Rivals Down South.